All right, good morning everyone, and welcome to Lysso Sanborn's Senior Exhibition. So how this works is Lysso will have 15 or 20 minutes to make his presentation. At the end, we'll have time for questions. I'll open it up to the panel first and then invite audience members to ask questions. Lysso will respond, and then afterwards we'll ask the audience and Lysso to stay in the hall while the panel deliberates. And if I have my way, I'd love for us just to make a unanimous decision and then invite you in so we can process with you. And so I ask that everyone's cell phone is actually turned off instead of on vibrate, or because sometimes that vibrating can be super distracting. And then just to be mindful of side chatter so that we can give Lysso our full attention. And so, any questions before we begin? All right, fantastic. Good luck, Lysso. And Kathy will give you a little wave at 15 minutes just to let you know that you have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
All right.
So, for my senior ex, I was archiving maps at Jessup. I had been doing it for about 2 years already, and I really enjoyed it. This map here is actually, I was able to bring it in, and it's right here. This was severely damaged. My essential question, from the get-go, I knew that I wanted to do I wanted to archive maps. I just didn't know what my essential question was going to be. And as I got more and more into the project, I started thinking about how can preserving and conserving maps of Maine and Mbi help me learn about the history, and could it possibly help me make predictions about the future of Maine and Mbi? Why I chose my project? I've always loved learning about history, and I love sharing what I learned. And growing up, the Jessup has been a huge part of my life, and I wanted to give back to all the wonderful staff members there because I have so many fond memories of my childhood there. Being a librarian, it was something that I know I wanted to do as a career, and I wanted to see if I wanted to go into just being a general studies librarian or an archivist, and this was a chance for me. And I wanted to get some job experience before I went and spent money on college to study to be an archivist in case I didn't like it, because I didn't want to waste money. Prior knowledge, I knew what they did, but I didn't know how they did what they did. And I, like many others, thought that the words map and chart, I thought that they were interchangeable. I thought they were the same thing, but turns out they're not. And I also thought, I knew some of this from, I knew kind of how they did it by watching documentaries on History Channel, and it looked easy. So I thought, it might be fairly simple, but it's always a learning experience. And I found out it was not easy at all. There was so much that I didn't know about it. My mentor, Kathy Woodside, I've known her since pre-K, actually, since I was in daycare. She has a background in special education and was good friends with my mom and good friends with Michelle Gertler, and I thought that she would be a perfect fit for me as a mentor. Abigail was not my mentor, but she helped Kathy and I tremendously with our project. She's a student, a senior at COA. She was doing an internship with Kathy, and she was a tremendous help, as I said. While Kathy and I were focused on preserving and conserving the maps, Abigail made notes and made a list of and ordered the tools and materials that we needed to properly store and repair the maps and charts. So she was the business, while Kathy and I were mainly focused on just the maps. Abigail was very business focused, and it was an absolute joy to work with her. She wanted to come to the presentation, but she had other obligations. Sean Todd is a professor at COA and the father of one of my best friends. When one of our maps didn't have a key, there was a few of them, we didn't know what the notations, the different symbols or letters and numbers meant. So I reached out to Sean, and he teaches a class on reading maps and charts, mostly charts, and he's part of Allied Whale, so he knows a lot about this kind of stuff. And with his help, we were able to create our own little key of what the different notations on the charts meant. This information here is some of the stuff that I learned from Sean. On maps and charts, the meaning of a code is dependent on the placement and case of the letters. For example, if it was read 3, lowercase f, uppercase S, uppercase C, it means that the water there is 3 fathoms deep with a bottom made up of sandy clay. While if the F and the C are lowercase, it means it's 3 fathoms deep with a bottom made up of sand with a 2 feet hull clearance, so only boats with 2 feet deep hulls could safely pass through there. And so it could be completely disastrous if misinterpreted, because it could hit the bottom and just take the bottom off the ship and it would sink. We collaborated with the Maine State Library. We worked with Adam Fisher, who's an archivist at the Maine State Library. They kindly have let the Jessup store some of, we didn't have room for all of the maps that we had in our collection, so they were kind enough to let us store some of our maps in their gigantic storage warehouse, which I got to visit and was very cool. So some of the challenges, I didn't face either of these, but these were in my research. I found iron gall ink was used in the Middle Ages, 23 to 79 AD, and it was so acidic that very few documents that were written using it have survived. The background is that there is a picture of what's left of a document that was written using iron gall ink. Ingredients were tannin, which was used to take the hide off of leather to cure it in the Middle Ages, which is where tanning got its name. Vitriol, highly acidic, strongly magnetic, and it is made of using the runoffs of mining ferrous magnetic metals. And gum arabic, which is the only the only component in it that's not acidic. Everything, it's literally acid with tree sap in it. One test to see if a document contains iron gall ink, I found, is to run a magnet over it, but this does irreparable damage, so it's used only as a last resort. Static electricity, believe it or not, is very damaging to some maps, because some maps were, the ink that they were used had a powder base, and so if it had static electricity, parts of the ink could actually be lifted off of the map, which, as I said, if it's a chart and you're trying to go through a place and you can't see how the depth or anything, could mean life or death. So, iron gall ink has iron traces in it, so it conducts electricity very well. surprisingly, iron gall ink doesn't get lifted off the paper, but static electricity can actually aggravate and reactivate iron gall ink. So it could be dormant. It could have used up most of its acidity, and then be submitted to static electricity and become active again. Preservation and conservation, they're not the same thing. Many people confuse these two terms. I know I did before I started the project. To preserve an artifact means to prevent damage to the item in question, and to conserve means to repair current damage and prevent further damage. So to preserve means to prevent before, and then conserving, you conserve it, repair current damage, and then you preserve it. The steps of preserving, how the tools work. Protecting preservation, this is from the Society of American Archivists. Preservation, protecting materials by minimizing chemical and physical deterioration and damage to minimize the loss of information and extend the life of an item. Conserving is the repair or stabilization of materials through chemical or physical treatment to ensure that they survive in their original form for as long as possible. And this is the official archival process from the Society of American Archivists. Number 1, observe and document the overall condition of the item in case you damage it. You have a record of what it looked like before. Prepare, ensure that you have proper tools and documentation materials ready. And conserve, and then repair. Tools of the trade. This is a bone folder used for making creases when making map folders, and as seen up here. And it's also for applying repair tape to damaged maps. Has a tapered end, which is used to apply repair tape and to make the creases permanent, while the rounded end is used to make the scores to fold on. They used to entirely be made out of cattle bone, but now are made of other materials like Teflon. Teflon ones are very good because, unlike cattle bone, tape does not stick to Teflon. Filmoplast, archival repair tape, non-acidic, will not yellow with age. Filmoplast P is a solid white. Filmoplast P plus is clear for use on the front of maps. Different weights we used. The bean weight is basically bean bags sewed together. Edge weight, which I have one up here. There's a slit in it to put the edge of the paper in if the document can't handle the pressure that a view weight, which is made of glass, or a bean weight. If it can't handle the pressure that a view weight exerts, but needs more pressure than a bean weight can provide, we use this. Tools. Another tool, anti-static paper. I have a big sheet right there. Right here. We put it over the maps to prevent damage from static electricity. These are plastic paper clips. Rust damage is one of the worst types of damage that a map can sustain, and more often than not is not repairable. This is a before picture of this was stored in 2 pieces. It somehow had gotten folded, broken. We found one piece and we couldn't find the other, so we set it aside. Found the other. Then we had a kind of a difficult time finding the other piece that we had set aside. But eventually, I was able to fix it, and it's right up here. First, I clipped the two halves of the map together, and then I used a bone folder to... I applied the thermoplast lightly, and then I used the thin tapered edge to make the tape adhere. And I found out that you can't just slap it on, and there's a specific pressure that you need to do. If it's too light, then the tape will just come off and just crumple up into a ball. But if it's too hard, you risk damaging the map. Setting up the database for the maps and charts was a challenge. We started out with a specific set of criteria, but found that we had to change several headings and actually convert the map size in order to have the database be similar to the Maine State Library database, so that we could collaborate with them, so that they could also, once this is done, they can have it so that they have a record that we have the maps. And right here I have a print off of some of the pages of the map heading. The title headings were map name, if it had one, how many we have, the date it was published, comments on the map's condition, the type of map, size, and the publisher. What I learned a lot of things. I learned about preparing maps, and that it takes a specific amount of pressure to make archival repair tape adhere. I also learned that it's very, very difficult, even though it says easy to use on the thermoplast, it is not at all. We had to look it up, and one of the websites said you have to squirt the back of it with a needle. I'm like, but it's supposed to be easy to use. So it was difficult. I learned the difference between maps and charts. Maps show land, mainly, just only land. Charts have mostly water, very little land, except for use as reference points or to show where shoals or lighthouses are. So they're not interchangeable, or as interchangeable as I thought. I also learned that you can tell, while you can tell a lot about the history of a place just by looking at how the maps have changed, you can't always make predictions about the future. There were many challenges, but I persevered. What I gained, I feel, was time management. As I said, the challenge of finding a part of a map with no guarantee that we would find the other half. Before I started my project, I would have just dropped everything and just spent all my time looking for the other part of the map, and I would not have gotten it as much as I got done. And I feel like my organization and knowledge, I gained knowledge about organization. Many of the maps were in boxes, and none of them were organized, and none of them were cataloged. So I feel like the process of archiving the maps helped me be more organized in my work. And my employer at my other job at the One Stop actually came up to me a couple weeks ago and told me that he's noticed that I have been more focused at work and not as distracted, and I've been able to manage my time there better. So, and I made great connections. I'm looking forward to continuing my work at Jessup, and I have been in contact with Adam Fisher, and I have a potential job placement at the Maine State Library. Still working that out. back to my essential question. How can preserving and conserving maps of Maine and MBI help me learn about the history and possibly make predictions? The history of MBI in Maine is shown by observing the changes in the landscapes from maps made in different years. What I found very amusing was where the Bar Harbor Fire Department is. There was a casino there that burned down in the fire of '47. And then there was nothing built there until the fire station was built there, which I kind of find ironic because something there burned down, and now it's a fire station. And the future. It can be tentatively predicted by observing the maps and charts, but there's no guarantee, 100% guarantee, because of not only natural changes, but man-made changes as well. I didn't get as much as I hoped I would have done because of many reasons. There was flooding, 2 events of flooding at the Jessup. And the other space challenge was not having a consistent workspace. We would often have to relocate in the middle of a work session because of the different meetings that were going on. And I've documented 48 out of the roughly 300 or 400 maps that we have in our collection. I want to thank Kathy Woodside, my mentor, for being absolutely supportive and wonderful. Sean Todd for helping us with the maps. Abigail Jackson for how much help she gave us. Adam Fisher and Mel Rice and the Jessup staff for making the staff feels like family to me now because of Mel and all the rest. They're very welcoming and appreciative and glad to have me there. And Miss Muzzy, my Senior X teacher. They're my sources.
I'd invite the panelists to ask questions.
One question.
Louise raised her hand.
I was just wondering, you said you've been working on the doing map archiving for like 2 years. Did you know that you were going to be doing this as your senior when you started?
I had no idea. It was just a fun hobby. Like, I knew that I wanted to do this. I knew that I wanted to give back to the Jessup for everything that they've done for me. And I knew that I wanted to be in some kind of teaching position. I didn't know what, because I love sharing random facts, and I love learning about the history of everything. So I had no idea that it was going to be my Senior X, but I'm very glad that it ended up being my Senior X. Yeah.
You said that you wanted to learn about being an archival librarian before you went to college. Did you confirm that that's something that you want to study?
Yes. I have enjoyed this process so much. It's not easy, but it is one of the most satisfying feelings ever to be able to take a map that was completely just in half and be able to bring it in today completely whole because of the work that and the things that I learned.
Maybe your essential question was, what would this tell you about the future of India? Did you find anything that would address it?
I don't feel confident enough to make much predictions because of the man-made changes as well as natural changes. But I am afraid that if we don't take action because of both natural changes and man-made changes, that eventually the coast will not be as beautiful as it is now.
your chart tell us? Or what's can you tell us about the chart?
Yeah, this is a map from Wells to Cape Ann, Maine. It has a lot of information on it. It was published in 1867, and it is chart 101, or 108 of the coast charts that were made by the Department of Interior Survey, the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey, which is still in Washington. And so this is just a piece of history. It has heat damage and water damage as well as bug damage. The edges are ragged, but we did what we could. And what I did notice is it has a lovely hand-penciled drawing of a clipper ship on the back of it. But the map, which unfortunately, if we had not been able to find the other half, would have been more valuable than the actual map itself. The drawing, if we hadn't found the other half, the drawing alone would have been more like historically important and more like worth a lot. Worth more than just having half of the map. Which is why I was really relieved that we found the other half. Another cool thing is this is one of the few maps, or charts actually, that has magnetic, not only does it have a magnetic north compass on it, it also has the, this was not made from one survey, this was made over 3 or 4 years. And so it actually has the annual variation of magnetic north written on the compass marking. So how many degrees it would change, it'll change every year based on the 3 or 4 years that they did the surveys. So you'd have to do a lot of to use this, you would have to do a lot of mental math, because this is from 1867. So the magnetic north would have dramatically changed, seeing as how the variation is 13 degrees by 20 degrees west. So it's not a big variation. It's like that, but since 1867 it will have changed dramatically. So I wouldn't recommend using this to sail. But someone did pencil in some very accurate ley lines. I can't remember what they're called, but they basically show the range of different lighthouses. And so you, judging up by the overlap of the lighthouses, because some of them are solid, some of them have a different color, some of them blink out a warning. So by being able to see what, being able to see the lights, you would be able to use the lines that someone drew to figure out exactly where you were in relationship to the big rocky cliff that's where the lighthouses are at. Any other questions?
From the audience?
I did bring in, so I brought in this chart if you want to look at it. I also brought in a map of Bar Harbor from 1907. This one, whoever we acquired it from did not properly restore it. They laminated it, so there's heat damage and it's very wrinkled. And unfortunately, we cannot do anything about it without destroying the entire map. So it's like this. It's right up here. What's really cool is this was used, it has a directory of everybody who lived in Bar Harbor in 1907 on the back of it. I also, the maps right there in the roll, or in the tube, those are maps we have yet to document. This is an edge weight right here. See the slit there. This is Tyvek tape, which we use to make the folders for the maps. I have a pair of the gloves that I wear, and I actually have brought in a bone folder.
Hopefully you guys can take a look on your way out, and I think at this time we'll ask the audience and the listener himself to step into the